Compassionate people ask for what they need. They say no when they need to, and when they say yes, they mean it. They're compassionate because their boundaries keep them out of resentment. Brené Brown. Hello, and welcome to the Forever Love podcast. I'm your host and relationship coach, Lily Mtongwiza, and today we are going to talk about boundaries. Specifically, how to establish boundaries without creating unrealistic expectations. So in today's episode, I'm going to show you how you can make the ultimate shift from struggling to get a man to respect your boundaries and feeling offended and frustrated to establishing boundaries that are created from a place of love and can be honored no matter what the other person chooses to do. And I want to encourage you right now to come and join our Facebook group because we are going to be talking about boundaries all week. And I've got a special devotional for you straight out of the Ready for the One program. All you need to do to grab it is go over to proverbs2426.com/devotional. That's proverbs2426.com/devotional. You'll be sent a 7-day devotional with an invite to the Facebook group where we will be discussing boundaries and red flags all week. And if you decide to work with me, I have an extra special bonus I want to tell you about at the end of this episode. So no matter what you're doing right now, I want you to focus because establishing boundaries is one of the kindest things you can do for yourself and for those around you. I remember when I had virtually no boundaries and my life and the things that I chose caused me so much pain. I was really good at making other people happy, especially men, but I felt a lot of shame and regret over the things that I ended up doing to make them happy. But you, my friend, are in the right place, and I want to thank you for being here because this topic can totally transform the way you show up for your relationships. And today, we're going to talk about boundaries in the context of dating and romantic relationships, but the principles apply to every kind of relationship. So feel free to take what you learned from this episode and apply it wherever you need to. As I said, I struggled with boundaries for a long time. As a child, I grew up in a situation where the adults around me didn't protect my boundaries. And as I grew up, I thought that the happiness of other people was far more important than my own mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I was raised by a man who could easily go into a rage, and in order to avoid conflict, I learned at a very young age how to keep people happy. But as I got older, I realized that these compromises were having a really negative effect on me. And I had to find a way to live from a place of integrity if I was ever going to enjoy any real peace and joy in my life. Because when you learn how to recognize and honor your own boundaries, you move into alignment with God's will. And you open up the pathways that lead to your God-given desires. I could never have enjoyed the marriage I have today if it wasn't for the work I did 10 years ago when I began to establish some healthy boundaries in my life. And this is work that you will continue to do for the rest of your life. It is not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Your boundaries will continue to evolve as you go through different stages of your life. That is why it is such an important skill to acquire as early on in life as possible. I think we should all be teaching healthy boundaries to children, but unfortunately, we teach them the opposite. We teach them to ignore that natural inclination inside of them that says, hey, I don't want to do that. And we push children to kiss their awkward Aunt Betty or give weird Uncle Ted a hug when you don't want to. And we ignore that natural desire to keep ourselves safe, and we teach kids to override that. And now as an adult, we need to listen to those inclinations and that voice within us and honor that natural boundary that we want to create for ourselves. Now, I'm going to give you the basics to get started here. And through the devotional and inside the free Facebook group, we're going to cover all of the essentials to begin your journey of establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries. But I know how difficult it is to really establish these things in your life. And that's why I'm also going to be doing an advanced workshop this Saturday, July 3rd, so that I can personally help you work on your boundaries in a group coaching interactive workshop where you'll have an opportunity to share your personal struggles and get individualized help and a plan to move forward. I'm going to formally invite you to the workshop at the end of this episode. If you choose to continue this journey with me, the Boundaries and Red Flag workshop is your way to continue to implement everything you're about to learn and troubleshoot the challenges that will inevitably come up when you begin to say no to the people you love. Throughout the workshop, I'll be answering questions, sharing behind the scenes info about my own journey, and coaching you so that you can see how all of this fits together in a way that is personalized for you. So I hope you'll join me this Saturday, July 3rd, for the advanced workshop because I know it will be so worthwhile for your emotional and spiritual well-being as you pursue your God-given desire for a Christ-centered marriage. I'll give you all the registration details at the end. But to begin, let's talk about what it looks like to establish beautiful boundaries. The first thing you need to know is, what are boundaries? We have a lot of confusion around this, but we're going to make it really simple by saying boundaries are a decision you make about what you need to stay emotionally, physically, and spiritually safe. And then you add to that boundary a clear statement about what you will do if somebody violates your boundary. So I had a coaching client who really struggled with this in her romantic relationship. She felt confused about what is a boundary and what is the guy just not meeting her expectations of what someone should do in a relationship. And so we need to get really clear on a boundary is something you set to keep yourself safe. It is a safety issue. It is not an expectation or a standard that you set, but it is those things that you do to protect yourself. It is like locks on the door. It is like having walls around your house. Like your house is created by having walls, by setting boundaries, by deciding this is what is mine and what is off limits to the public world. And then deciding on purpose who is allowed to come into your space and under what circumstances. So, for example, I live with my husband and our 2 girls, and the 4 walls around us, our home, help us to differentiate who's allowed in and who's allowed out. Now, my niece also lives with us. She's not part of my immediate family, but she has a special pass to be in our house. And we have a gardener who comes by and he takes care of the lawn sometimes. Now, he has a special opportunity to be in our proximity. But if that gardener suddenly walked into our house, that would be a boundary violation. Likewise, if somebody off the street came into our yard, that would be a boundary violation. Not every boundary needs to be explicitly explained to each and every person. We have a lot of assumed boundaries, like your boundaries around your personal body are assumed. It is assumed that you do not want random men to walk up and try to have sex with you. That is a personal boundary. And when somebody violates that boundary, we call them a rapist. So while some boundaries are explicit and universally culturally acknowledged, other boundaries are not. And you may need to be more specific about your personal boundaries. So let's talk about where you need boundaries. Boundaries are needed when someone is doing something to you or at you that causes damage to you or your property or the things that you hold of value. It is a violation of your personal space or well-being. Boundaries are for you. When we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about that line that if you cross it, you will take action to protect yourself and to stay in integrity. But these boundaries should be made with love, not from fear, anger, punishment, or rejection. Now, I had a history of violating my own boundaries. I would put myself into situations where I would do things that were out of alignment with what I truly wanted. I would ignore my God-given desires in favor of immediate gratification and pleasure. I had boundaries, but I never expressed them to anybody else. And as a result, they ended up being repeatedly violated, and I felt a lot of shame about the person I had become. I was so scared of losing relationships that I chose instead to numb out to the presence of Christ within me. And I want to be very careful here because sometimes people violate our boundaries and there's nothing we can do about it. We are truly victims. And sometimes we have to make painful decisions about which parts of ourselves to protect. Sometimes giving people what they want is a survival tactic. If you had to do certain things to keep your alcoholic father from going into a rage as a child, please know that what happened to you is not your fault. But now, as an independent adult, I want you to know how to create and maintain healthy boundaries. Because it's easy to take the survival skills that we had as children and continue to use them in situations where they no longer apply. I'm speaking from experience here. I was so scared of making anybody upset and feeling rejection that I would do whatever it took to keep people happy. So we can get into a habit of violating our own boundaries when we go along with things, when we continue to people please, and it's not in a survival setting, it is just in an instinctive, habitual way. Boundaries are one part setting the boundaries, and then the second part is you being responsible for maintaining the boundary. Now, sometimes this is going to sound like an ultimatum, and ultimatums have negative connotations. But remember, good boundaries are for you. It's what you're going to do to be safe and healthy, and they have to start with compassion and love. Compassion and love for yourself, first and foremost, and then compassion and love for the other person. Now, it is always best when we make these decisions about our boundaries from a place of emotional and spiritual adulthood. This helps us stay away from blaming and being stuck in victimhood. It's hard work, and it doesn't always feel good. But people pleasing creates a situation where we are going after immediate gratification and just trying to keep everyone happy. I want you to step into a space you create where you can open your heart and say no, and say what you really want for yourself. Good boundaries come from a place of unconditional love and acceptance. We're not trying to change the other person. We're simply acknowledging who we are and what we want. We don't want to create boundaries from a place of defensiveness or on the attack because those end up being toxic and they continue to create more conflict. They're negotiations rather than clear boundaries of, if you do this, I will do this. So all of this begins by lovingly creating limits for what you will tolerate for yourself. This allows you to create relationships that serve you because ultimately, relationships are supposed to serve us. We use our relationships for our good and for the good of those around us. If your relationship is robbing you, it is not a healthy relationship. Instead of continuously disconnecting from everybody who's not easy to love, we create boundaries and establish those so that people know how to interact with us in a healthy way. Now, establishing boundaries involves honest conversations. And you can't have healthy boundaries when you're avoiding conflict at your own expense. We need to be as clear as possible in order to be kind. Please don't expect anyone to read your mind. So whatever your boundary is, you need to have a conversation with the other person about it if you expect them to honor your boundaries. Now remember, boundaries are something you create for yourself, unless of course you're a parent and then you're creating boundaries for your children. But you cannot create boundaries for other people. You have to start with yourself and get very clear and be prepared to share those boundaries with the other person. So for example, kissing on a first date. First, you got to get clear on what you will stand for and expose yourself to. Then we want to talk about that boundary when it becomes necessary. It's not necessary to start your dating profile with, I don't kiss on first dates. But it might be necessary once you're actually on the date. And if that guy is leaning in or getting too cozy, you might need to explain to him, hey, I appreciate that you're interested in me, but I want you to know I don't kiss on a first date. And then if he tries to kiss you again, then you back up and you say, I don't kiss on a first date. If you try to kiss me again, I'm going to leave. Now, he's allowed to go and do whatever he wants, and he can go kiss whoever he wants. But the fact of the matter is, you don't want to be kissed by him. It's not your job to convince him that he shouldn't try to kiss women on a first date, because some women might appreciate this behavior. You just don't happen to be that woman. So explain the request and then explain the action that will take place if it is not honored. Here's another example. If a man texts you and says, hey babe, show me a nude pic, he has not violated your boundary. Men are allowed to ask for what they want. Nothing has gone wrong here, and you don't need to feel offended or insulted. You may decide to simply block this person immediately because they're not the type of person you want to date. And in this way, you are maintaining your boundary. Or you might decide to say, hey, I don't send those kinds of pics. If you ask me again, I'm going to block you. Now, always remember that you are prioritizing your personal safety and well-being and avoiding situations that would leave you vulnerable. So we want to be mindful of the situations we are putting ourselves into to make sure we always have the opportunity to act on those consequences we have stated will happen, and what consequences are possible given the situation. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's your job to follow through on the consequence that you have stated. So you might say, or I'm going to leave, or I'm going to call the police, or I'm going to punch you in the face. You need to be aware of the situation and what is possible, and then follow through and make sure you're willing to do whatever you said you would do. So we don't want to set ourselves up for consequences we're not prepared to follow through on. And this is the difference between articulating the consequences and having unhealthy ultimatums in our relationships. Now, like I said, boundaries are all about protecting your personal well-being. But if a guy doesn't text you back after a date, there has been no boundary violation. You might say, but I expect to be treated this way. But he has not violated a boundary, and it would be inappropriate to demand that he do something differently. Then you're using the relationship to try and manipulate him. Instead, you just want to establish what is good for you and then act on that. If you don't want to be with somebody who doesn't text you back, we don't need to try and change him. You just need to find a different person who wants to text you back after a date. I'm going to give you a final example here. Suppose a guy has a habit of showing up at your house unannounced. Now, if in the past you've let him in and he's a friend and all of this stuff, and you want to establish a new boundary with him, you would want to begin by saying, I would prefer if before you come, you give me a call. Because if you don't call, the door will probably be locked and I'm probably not going to answer. Because remember, you're not obligated to let someone in just because he's on your doorstep. So you're going to want to explain to him, it's better for both of us if when you want to come by, you call me and we set something up so I can let you know if it's a good time or not. The important part is when you state your boundary, you actually follow through. So if this guy shows up at your house unannounced, you don't let him in. You ultimately control whether or not a boundary is valid by whether or not you follow through. Your boundaries are established when you follow through on the consequences that you have stated. Now, when you follow through on your boundaries, people are going to have an emotional response. And this is the hardest part. He might feel rejected or pissed off, or he might not like it. But please know, you did not make him feel that way. He feels that way as a natural result of trying to violate your boundaries. So please do not take responsibility for his emotions. Make sure that your boundaries are sincere. Get really clear in your own mind and heart with what's okay and what's not. So, for example, don't claim that you have a no kissing rule when secretly you hope he kisses you. Speak truth and then follow through. This is what intimacy in a relationship looks like. Your boundaries shouldn't be about the other person. They should be about you preserving and honoring what's important to you and then being free to have conversations about that. Now, these conversations may be difficult, but healthy boundaries help you to avoid pretending and allow you to establish a relationship founded on truth. And they will help you to avoid blaming other people for your lack of boundaries. Now, you know that you have a boundary issue. Now, you will know that you have a boundary issue if you are continuously complaining to other people about the way someone is treating you. If you're angry and resentful about how someone in your life continues to behave towards you or at you or to you, you have a boundary issue that needs to be resolved on your end. This behavior of allowing people to continually violate your boundaries is what ends up making relationships toxic. It's not because the other person is toxic. People in and of themselves are not toxic, but sometimes our behaviors and the way we engage with other people, the relationship can be toxic because it's no longer healthy, it's no longer mutual, it's no longer for us. So if you're not identifying clear boundary violations and taking the necessary steps to protect yourself, then the relation is going to inevitably be dysfunctional. So I hope you can see how powerful it is when you have healthy boundaries and you focus on having your own back. It's not about trying to make other people behave better, and you don't have to be offended or upset. Instead, you can calmly focus on your actions and what you're going to do to stay safe. Would you like me to help you establish healthy boundaries with as little confusion as possible? If so, you have two options. This week, I'm going to be helping everybody in the Facebook group understand the basics of boundaries because this is a fundamental skill you have to have in order to enjoy healthy relationships. But there's only so much I can do inside of a Facebook group to personally help you go through some of the blind spots that you might have when it comes to the subtle differences between maintaining boundaries, spotting red flags, and communicating your expectations. Having healthy boundaries is hard work, and it doesn't come easily or naturally, especially if you have underlying beliefs like, what I want doesn't matter, or I just want to make them happy. I can help you cut through the confusion in the Boundaries and Red Flags workshop, where we will discuss more advanced issues and you'll have an opportunity to be coached by me and have your specific questions answered. This workshop is a 3-hour live and interactive workshop with a small group of like-minded women. I will be going beyond what was covered in the Facebook group to give you a more in-depth look at how to establish healthy boundaries no matter what your current situation looks like. The workshop is going to be hosted through Zoom and will include advanced material, conversations, coaching, and questions. As a Christ-centered coach, I always begin with prayer because I believe that this is His work, and we want to invite the Holy Spirit to guide everything we do and work through us. This is going to be a life-changing and valuable experience that will equip you to make better decisions about what you want in your life and to help you take action from a place of love. Everything will be recorded and you will get access to the videos within 72 hours so that you can go back and review the workshop as often as you like. Listen, I'm not special. I want you to know that it took me a long time to figure out how to maintain healthy boundaries, and it's something I continue to work on and will continue to work on for the rest of my life. I have a strong desire to keep everyone happy, especially as a wife and mom. It is so tempting to do things at the expense of my own mental and physical health and well-being. Boundary violations aren't always dangerous situations in which you're being physically attacked. They can show up in a multitude of ways, and often we are the ones who are the most common violators. Now, this workshop comes with a money-back guarantee. If for any reason you attend the workshop and then decide you didn't get any value out of it, just email me within 7 days and I'll give you a complete refund. I know that this is going to be an incredible experience and I will back that up. Now, there is a small registration fee of just $50, and this helps cover the costs of providing free content in the Facebook group and supporting this podcast. You can head over to proverbs2426.com/workshop to sign up now. Please believe me when I say, I know what it's like to feel used and helpless, angry at the people around you for not having the decency to respect your most basic boundaries, and even more upset with yourself for not doing anything about it. I want to help you establish beautiful boundaries in your most important relationships, and this workshop is designed to help you do that. But if you know that boundaries have been a challenge for you and you're ready to work on some of the underlying issues that are keeping you stuck, please don't miss this workshop. Henry Cloud says, "Boundaries define us. They define what is me and what is not. A boundary shows me where I end and where someone else begins, lending me to a sense of ownership. Knowing what I am to own and take responsibility for gives me freedom." Thank you for joining me. Please grab your free devotional and join us inside the Facebook group this week, and hopefully I will see you inside the workshop this Saturday, July 3rd. All the links are in the show notes, and if you have any questions, please DM me. I'm at Lily Mtongwiza. That's Lily, Lily, Mtongwiza, Mtongwiza. Until next time, God bless you.